Piera Gelardi, welcome to Live Inspired with John O'Leary.
Thank you so much for having me.
I always wish I had hit record earlier because then our friends could have heard this weighty, meaningful, inspirational conversation that you and I had off air. Now you and I have to back the train up a little bit and have it on air. So I welcome you into our family, Piera. You and I had scheduled this interview a couple weeks ago and you weren't able to make it. Do you remember why?
Yeah, the blizzard in New York, I got trapped. I mean, it's not really trapped. I was in Costa Rica, so, I was in paradise, but yeah, I couldn't make it back to New York.
Remember kind of thinking how ironic that this lady who grew up in Maine is missing a conversation due to snow. So I'm going to back away from Costa Rica, away from New York, all the way back to your home state of Maine.
Mm.
Talk about growing. You've accomplished like a wild amount of success relatively early in life. And that kind of success usually begins even earlier than that. So talk about growing up in a small town in Maine.
Yeah, so I grew up in a small town in Maine. My dad is an entrepreneur and engineer. My mom is a social worker and artist and someone like deeply connected to her community. And I grew up like with my family doing these business brainstorms around the kitchen table when I was in grade school. So my parents, we would come up with an idea, like maybe we'd say, "Oh, let's start a kids karaoke club." And then my parents would ask me a series of questions. They'd say, "Okay, what's the karaoke club going to be called? Why is it going to be different from other karaoke bars?" I would say, "Oh, it's for kids, and so it's going to have, Disney hits one night, pop songs the next. We're going to call it, what should we call it?" And then we'd all be brainstorming, and one of us would be, "Oh, karaoke." So we would do these brainstorms, and it was around anything that anything my brother and I were interested in. My parents would just entertain it and kind of let us play it out and let our imagination go wild. So I grew up with
Can I ask about that? Was that
yeah.
just fun dinner table conversation like, hey man, just let's go to the moon and back and then we'll do the dishes? Or were they actually trying to help you think through like how do you dream of something big and how do you execute moving toward that?
I think it was both. I think it's still something that my family loves to do. We love to come up with these hybrid business ideas and just riff on ideas and brainstorm. And I do it with my daughter now, who's 7. And I think it's both. It's one, just like finding the joy and the glee and like the creativity in, yeah, dreaming up wild ideas. And then also they would ask some of the more practical questions to help us to see how we could take a big idea like that and actually, the considerations we would need to have to bring it into life. So that was a really foundational experience for me, and also growing up with these playful parents that prioritize play in their life, even as they, had jobs, had dealt with
Yeah.
illness, dealt with loss, were navigating all kinds of different things. I saw how they wove play into their lives, and so that really formed me. And yeah, I grew up in a really small town. I feel like as a child, like one of my favorite activities was beach combing. So it was just, wandering the beach and looking for, the things that other people would think are meaningless and calling it treasure, right? Like you're just looking for that hint of blue sea glass, that interesting shaped shell. So that was sort of my childhood meditation growing up in Maine and something that really shaped me as well in terms of just always looking for beauty and wonder in the world.
Wow. So I've interviewed almost 1,000 folks on this podcast and have had many, many, many more than that conversations with leaders in boardrooms and just, walks along the park. I've never met anyone who's ever found a note in a bottle. Not one person.
Ugh,
You have found one
three.
and another and another. Like that's crazy. So is that the walk on the beach as you're looking for blue glass that you stumbled into these bottles? Is that where you found these?
Yeah, so I have trained myself through this Wonder Wander practice that started as a beachcomber in Maine to look for wonder. And, my friends, when they walk down the street with me, they're always surprised by the things that I notice, the things I point out. And it's the type of things that other people are completely ignoring. But I've trained my eye to look for it. So, yeah, I found 3 messages in a bottle in my life. And the third one actually was my sign to write the book that I'm writing.
Wow. Tell
Yeah.
that story.
Yeah. So it was 2022, I believe. And I had left my big job at Refinery 29. We were acquired, and I was thinking about what am I going to do next. Play had been this really important part of my life and has woven through my personal life, my professional life, helped me to navigate all kinds of things. And then when I left Refinery, decided I was going to give a gift of joy to the world and lead people. It was during the pandemic. So I decided I would lead people in these joyful play workshops. I opened it up and I led thousands of people through these joyful play workshops. We were dancing through the pandemic. We were doing word play. We were drawing. We were journaling. And it was so joyful. And in that process, I heard from people, they were saying, this is helping my depression. This is helping my anxiety. This is helping me connect to my mom or my sister who are on another continent. And so I got to experience through leading these play workshops the power of play, of leading adults in play.
Mm.
And it was really meaningful to me. I'm very driven by impact. And so hearing that these play workshops were having that effect on people was really meaningful. And so I was thinking about, am I going to dedicate the next chapter of my career to play? But play is so misunderstood. People think it's frivolous, they think it's unimportant, they think that it's for kids. And so even though I had seen the power, even though I knew there was potency there, I
Yeah.
had a lot of self-doubt that was creeping in. And so I was talking to my good friend Sophia, and I said, I'm really thinking about this and considering if I dedicate this next chapter of my life to play and if I write a book on this topic. And she said, why don't you ask for a sign? And so I thought, why not, And so I went on a wander and I looked for a sign. And I was in Cologne, Germany at the time, which is where my partner's family lives. And I was walking, and first I saw a carnival that was set up, but it was sort of a gray day, and the carnival wasn't fully up. And I thought, I don't think this is my sign. I passed a playground, but those are very common. So I thought, that's not exceptional. That's not my sign. And I got to the end of the walk, and it had been like kind of a gray, gloomy day. And I thought, okay, I'm going to turn around now. I haven't found my sign. Maybe I'll find it on the way back, but I think it's time to turn around. And I walked down to the edge of the Rhine River. And just as I did, the clouds broke, sun started shining. I know this
I mean,
sounds
you do
ridiculous.
realize this all sounds made up. I mean, we
It
should just
sounds
call
made
it
up,
out.
but I have video. I have it on video. I swear it's true. The clouds broke, the sun came out, and all of a sudden I heard this clinking sound, and I looked down at my feet, and there was a message in a bottle. And I picked it up. It was in this beautiful, like bezeled bottle with a wax seal and a message written in German from this little boy, Emiliano, age 7, who wrote about his love of play and creativity. And so I actually ended up having a correspondence with this family, and the bottle was not only was it, that it talked about play and creativity, but the bottle itself was part of a project that Emiliano's mom had put together to help the kids have more creativity and connection through these playful acts in the pandemic. So they had done like a whole series of things, and this was one of them. And I found the bottle just at the right time, and it ended up, yeah, being the spark, for me to follow what was ultimately my gut, which was that said that this is a really important topic and this is something to pursue and dedicate your life to.
Mm, it's such a good story. I wrote a book a couple of years ago, actually came out during the pandemic called In Awe. And it was really about like seeing the world through the lens of a child.
Yeah.
And the way my kids were living at that time, they were all like 9, 7, 5, and 3, was so much better in so many regards than the way their mom and dad were living, and way better than the way our older neighbors were living, and way better than their parents were living. And onward from there, there was this curiosity and creativity and wonder that our kids naturally have, and then we lose.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that in your unwillingness to lose it, you go for a walk in Germany. You go for a walk on a cold, cruddy day, and your eyes, rather than being trained to your phone, which is where any good American would have their eyes looking when they're walking in Germany, like looking down at email, you were looking around. So I'm going to go back to the little girl who grew up
Yeah.
in Maine before she took off for New York and Costa Rica and then eventually Germany and back. I want you to talk a little bit about your mom. I know she's a social worker, and I think from your father, you learned a lot about creativity and engineering and getting it done. But social work and the heart behind that also teaches a lot to a child. What did you learn from your mother?
Yeah, my mom taught me a lot about caring for people. She's the type of person that when her friends are sick, she's showing up with a pot of soup or homemade cookies, or she hand paints letters and sends them to people on their birthday. She's really someone who shows up for her community. She does community service and is a social worker. So, yeah, from her, I really learned a lot about care, a lot about showing up for people, a lot about living from a place of your values and integrity. And she's also a very joyful person. She also is a wonder wanderer, like someone who is always pointing out, things of beauty. So the two of us together, we're just, pointing up, down, all around, looking for beauty in the world around us.
Well, in fact, you've dropped that term a few times, and I know you wrote about it. But for the folks who are hearing you for the first time, what does that mean? Wonder, wanderer.
So a wonder wanderer is someone who is looking for beauty in the world around, looking for patterns, looking for delight, has their eyes up with that eye of a child and is approaching the world curiously. So I take myself on these wonder wanderers, which are walks where I sort of decide I'm going to tune my frequency to the frequency of awe and delight, and am looking for things that I'm labeling treasure, like a beachcomber tells themselves that sea glass is treasure when someone else thinks it's broken glass.
Hmm. So that's your mom. And that's some of the example that she gave
Yeah,
you. What about your
yeah.
father?
My dad is insatiably curious. He's always researching, he's always asking questions. He's a mad scientist of sorts, like he's always tinkering. And whether it's, trying to make the best cask aged drink or trying to invent a new set of headphones that wrap around the back of your head. Like he's always making something, experimenting with something. So he taught me a lot about experimenting, about sort of a spirit of try it and see, where you're not so focused on the outcome or perfection, but you're focused on what can I learn and how do I kind of move something forward step by step. He's definitely taught me a lot about just living with curiosity, with an experimental mindset.
So as a young person, I was pretty convinced I would play baseball for a profession as I aged, and life had other plans for me. As you were growing up at this kitchen table and experiencing life through the lens of your mom and dad and sibling and Maine, small town and everything else, what were you
Yeah.
thinking as you were looking over the horizon? What were you thinking you might do as you got older?
Yeah, I've had a lot of different ideas. When I was 3, I wanted to be a birdie, a ballerina, get divorced, and live in Connecticut,
Big plans. I like it.
which is mostly inspired by my cool artist aunt who was divorced and lived in Connecticut. A very strange goal for a 3-year-old. But I had different ideas. There was definitely I always had sort of, I think also from my parents, this art and science. I was sometimes for a while I was really interested in being in science, being a marine biologist. I think that also grew from growing up in Maine by the ocean. But then I also was always interested in a lot of things in the arts. I thought I might be an artist, but it was different currents throughout. And I think, some people uh, they know the thing they want to do and they pursue it from the get-go. I think because I grew up with that experimental mindset, and also I have a big appetite for life and experience. And for me, success is living a storied life and having all kinds of different experiences. I've never had a single path, and I do a lot of different things. I've done a lot of different things within my life and my career. And that is always what I wanted, was to have a lot of different kinds of experiences and let those shape me and let those fuel my curiosity and my growth. And then I like to put different things together, in an interesting way.
I was wondering as I'm learning about you and reading about you and watching some of the podcasts you've been on in the past, you're so wildly creative. and innovative and edgy, kind of, which works in your profession today. And it certainly works in New York when you're 20 and you show up. But it doesn't always work well in a classroom of 14 other kids.
Mm.
So was school hard for you because it was so confined and you're in a desk and we sit in rows and the bell hasn't rung yet?
Yeah, it was challenging. It's funny, my mom actually brought me all these old report cards. She was cleaning her house and she, like take this stuff. And I was looking at the old report cards and yeah, a lot of them talked about my difficulty focusing and sitting still. Definitely some ADHD going on here. But yeah, I don't know. I enjoyed aspects of school because I really enjoy learning and curiosity. And I enjoyed teachers that were more experiential and more fluid with how
Right.
they taught, more playful. And I really struggled with teachers that were more rigid and strict and wanted us to fit into those boxes. So it was definitely a mix. I mean, I was a pretty good student, but it didn't always come very natural to me.
You mentioned earlier in our conversation about Refinery 29.
Mhm.
And I think many of our listeners and viewers would know what that is, but not all. So
Yeah.
for those who have never heard of it, what is what in the earliest stages, what was Refinery 29? What was it for you?
Yeah. So when I was 24, I started this company called Refinery 29, and it started as I was living in New York. It was really inspired by the independent designers and stores in New York. And at the time, there wasn't really, digital media was new. And so there wasn't really a place that celebrated these independent voices in fashion and style. And so we started Refinery as a place for these small niche independent designers and store owners to, yeah, be celebrated and for people to discover them. And it ended up growing to be really more about kind of an independent point of view for women, sharing these stories that were outside, that kind of challenged the status quo, that really pushed the envelope on how women were portrayed, how their stories were told. So we loved kind of taking topics like money that were thought of as taboo and making it much more open and these honest conversations. So like Money Diaries was one of our most popular
Yeah.
series, which was women talking very honestly about how much money they have, how they spend it, what does a day to day look like. So yeah, our content was all real, raw, relatable content that spoke to 360 degrees of a woman's life, and it was across digital content. We did a lot of big live events. We did films. It was very multi-dimensional towards the end, and of course, Refinery is still going. I'm just not there with it.
Sometimes when people hear around creative work like that, they think like, yeah, man, I have a brother too who runs a social media handle from the basement of my parents' house. And that's not at all what you and your co-founder built. I mean,
Yeah,
you guys,
yeah, we
well,
had.
at the high point, 500 employees, millions
Yeah.
and millions of impressions each day in the community. Like this was a rocket. Like this was massive influence.
Yeah, I mean, it started so small and grassroots, and it grew to, yeah, we had, you know, doing $100 million in revenue. We had 500 employees. We were a global company. Yeah, it got gigantic. It was a wild, wild ride.
What's one thing if you could look back at that lady who was leading it, what did she do best when you were leading that forward? And what do you wish you would have known when you were leading that forward? Because I know you've talked honestly about some work-life balance challenges and mental health and among other things, but
Yeah,
what was the thing you were doing best and what do you wish you would have done differently?
yeah. I think what I did best was be an inspiring leader and be a playful, joyful leader. I really loved bringing the creativity out of the people I worked with. I loved celebrating the people I worked with and the work. I was really good at sharing a vision with people and bringing them on board to bring it to life, and also being really risk-taking and bold. Like
Yeah.
I love to push us into new territory, to take on projects that other people might think were too ambitious or didn't fit who we were at the time, but that allowed us to grow and become something bigger. So I was really good at that. Where I struggled with a lot of things, and I think one thing was that I struggled with was not always seeing my own gifts as gifts. Like I there came a time in the company where we were bringing on a lot of people with more corporate backgrounds, and I started to feel like an imposter, right? Like I went to art school, I had built this company, but
Yeah.
I didn't have an MBA. I had never worked in a corporate environment. So people were coming in, they were using all this jargon, all this language that I didn't know. And I felt like I was, the art school kid at the adults table.
Hmm.
And I started to doubt if I even belonged in my own company. And I started to also kind of try to fit in with these new people. And in doing so, I shut down my curiosity. I shut down some of my big imagination. I shut down some of those playful qualities that got me to the point where we could hire these corporate people.
Interesting.
And as I started to shut down those parts of myself, I started to feel more and more hollow. I started to feel less resource, less resilient, less joy in the day to day. And I found myself at one point just laying on my apartment floor, crying about what a failure I was. And it was at this moment where, and from an outside perspective, I was at the high of my career, but internally, I just felt absolutely hollow. And I was so brittle. I was so unable to roll with, changes or conflict or feedback. I just was, everything kind of was setting me off to feel like I couldn't handle it. And it was actually recognizing that I needed to tap back into those qualities that got me to where I was instead of thinking I had to become a completely new person to get to that next place. That helped me. It was almost like those playful, creative qualities were my superhero cape. And
Right.
when I took them off, I didn't, I couldn't accomplish anything. And when I put them on, I could take on new challenges while still leaning into my strengths.
Mm. You made that mistake of thinking you had to be more than who you already were. And who you were was clearly enough. I mean, look where you were at that point in your life. Why do you think we collectively so frequently feel we have to put on a mask rather than be uniquely who we are that has led us to the joy and the playfulness and the success we've achieved to this point? So why do so many of us flip on the mask to pretend to be who we're not?
Yeah, I think it comes to just our deep human need for belonging and getting it in our head that there is a right way to be in a certain space or a right way to be in the world and trying to fit that sort of normal or yes, fit the box. And when we contort ourselves in that way, we forfeit the
Yeah.
beautiful qualities that make us authentically who we are. And those are the qualities that connect us to ourselves, to to each other. And they are the things that make us usually the most resilient and pliable when we're navigating the rocky road of life. And so when we kind of shave those parts of ourselves off to fit, we often, we can't roll. We become like a,
Yeah.
little little square. Can't roll anymore. Can't roll with the changes.
For the folks listening, you're missing right up here. Like it looks like she's cutting bread maybe with her
Yeah,
hand, like she's cutting off all the edges, and so you no longer have the ability to roll forward, and instead you're this box
exactly.
prison. Might
Thank
be
you for putting words to the visual. I was just
it was a beautiful visual.
riffing in real time.
Everybody should go to our YouTube channel right now and watch what you just missed out on. It was awesome. So you are helping us add those edges and those curves and that joy
Curves.
back into our life. Would you talk about why write this book and why write it now?
Yeah, so I have lived playfully throughout my life as we talked about, I've seen how being playful is such a source of joy, of creativity, of connection. I've seen it through my family. I've seen it through my work. I've seen it through my own personal journey,
Yeah,
with, mental health and relationships. I've seen how it has seen me through so many things and seen me through them with being more connected and curious about the world. So I really wanted to share that philosophy with the world. And as I was teaching these creative play workshops and seeing the impact that they were having on people, it made me feel even more enthusiastic that this is something that, adults, we lose touch with it, right? We think that
Yeah.
play is frivolous. We think that it is a reward for hard work. We think it's something that we only do when we're joyful, right? Like it's like for the vacation. But playfulness is how we stay connected to ourselves, to each other, to the world around us. And it has so many incredible benefits that we don't realize as adults. It is core to helping us be better problem solvers. It's core to helping us be more resilient, and it's core to finding joy in the micro moments of the day to day.
Mm, that's so good. You and I talked earlier about me witnessing joy, playfulness, curiosity in my kids, and not witnessing as much play, curiosity, and joy in their dad.
Right.
So, what is it about the little girl who leaves Maine and the little boy who leaves Missouri, and all of us as we advance through life that leaves behind the very thing that made us so remarkably joyful behind? Why do we give up that grand gift of play?
Yeah. So I think a lot of things happen. Sometimes for some people, they have adverse childhood experiences that make them have to grow up faster. For a lot of us, we get those voices in our head that tell us to be the responsible adult, but we don't realize, being the responsible adult doesn't mean we have to be joyless. Or we get the voice of the perfectionist in our head that, it has to be perfect. So that cuts us off from curiosity and experimentation because we're chasing this version of perfection.
Yeah.
For some people, it's the cool police, right? It's like, oh, be cool, don't be cringe. So there's
Have you
all,
been
I
talking to my
call them
middle
the
schoolers
anti-play
lately? I mean, these
posse.
are words I hear on the dinner table nightly.
Right.
Don't be cringe, Dad.
Don't be cringe. Well, that's the cool police. You can name it. You can say cringe sets me free. Cringe is my authenticity. But there's a
So,
lot of these internalized voices. I call them the anti-play posse, but we hear them as we grow up, and a lot of them are around efficiency, around responsibility, around these sort of qualities of adulthood that we think we should cut ourselves off from playfulness, that it is something that's frivolous, that's best left in childhood. But when we stop being playful, we become play deprived, and it makes us more brittle, less resilient, more like prone to kind of falling into anxiety, feeling less hopeful. All these voices and all these messages that we hear cut us off from the very thing that as kids we
wow.
had, which was that curious, creative engagement with life.
Mm. So if we have a listener right now who's tuning in and they're thinking, this is all very, very lovely, but I'm trying to figure out how to keep the lights on, and I'm trying to get dinner on the table, and I'm trying to get to work through traffic and get back and get the reports out and get to bed at some point before midnight so I can get up and get the wash out of the dryer and get the kids off to school. And John, there's no time for play. None. What would you say to them?
I would say that think of play as a mindset, playfulness as a mindset instead of play as time out. So how can you layer play onto your day to day? Like, for example, this morning I was making my daughter's school lunch, but I had music on and I was dancing as I was like making the pasta, putting it in her lunchbox. And it was just a micro moment, but it was so joyful. And I was getting the thing done that I do every single day, which is make her lunch. But I was doing it in a way that, was fun for me. Or sometimes my partner loves to make her, when he makes her breakfast, he arranges the fruit, that he's cut into like a little pattern. And it's such a small thing. It doesn't take any extra time, than just putting it on the plate regular, but it it's just that little spark of joy. So I think one thing is think about a routine remix. What's something that you're already doing, the laundry, making breakfast, commuting, and how do you layer a little micro moment of play on that?
Mm.
Maybe through movement, through a different soundtrack, through a different, giving it a different frame in your head, imagining it, as a movie. There's a lot of little ways that we can make our lives a bit more vibrant and playful that don't require extra time.
I'm thinking about you in the kitchen singing and a normal child looking at you thinking, my mother is crazy. This is so cringe. And if we're not
My daughter
careful,
sometimes does ask me not to sing.
for sure. I mean, listen, I have
I don't
four of them.
care.
So there's a lot of police in my house telling me, Dad, you got a lousy voice. You're a worse dancer. Please stop. And then that, if we're not careful, leads to us thinking maybe they're right. So
Mhm.
when the inner critic barks our way that you're too old, you don't have enough talent, you don't have enough time, whatever the thing is we hear from the critic saying you're not enough of this, how do you help silence that and return to who you really are? So how do you muffle the critic when you hear it?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the main thing is recognizing the critic, right? Like, in the book I have these anti-play posse voices, so sometimes we can name it. Oh, that's the cool police that's telling me I'm cringe. And then you can say cringe is my authentic expression and the right people will connect with it. My authentic expression is important to me thriving in the world. Or telling ourselves play isn't frivolous. It helps me to be more creative, connected, and alive. So I think the main thing is noticing when that inner critic is coming in and getting a little bit more informed about why play is important to us so that we can talk back to it with compassion. Those voices are there for a reason, trying to protect us, trying to keep us safe, keep us, help us fit in and belong. But ultimately, when we over index on listening to them, then we stop being authentic to ourselves, we stop feeling alive, and we stop being connected to the people around us.
You write about eight gifts of play, eight
Yes.
powers of play.
Hours of
Uh,
play.
I'll remind you of them on the chance that you're like, John, I got seven in my mind. I can't remember the eighth right now. So here they come. Audience,
Okay.
pay attention. Humor, imagination, exploration, creativity, movement, noticing, game making, and curiosity.
Mhm.
Of those eight, what's your favorite one? I know you have eight kids, you love them all, but which one is it like, oh man, I lean into this one.
I lean into movement. I'm a mover and shaker. I love the feeling of my body in motion. So, that comes through dancing in the kitchen as I'm making school lunch. It comes in the form of being very expressive with my hands when I'm, telling a story to a friend, or sometimes, even like a miming like I did earlier. I love running. When I'm running, I think of it as a joy and as a game because it's, that feeling of my body in motion for me is so intoxicating and is something that
Mm.
I really lean on in a lot of different moments, also to help me with anxiety, to help me with depression. I really lean into dancing and movement as a main form of play.
I think as we get older, if we don't stretch the muscle, you refer to these things as muscles, these powers. If we don't use it, we lose it frequently. And I believe we can get it back, but undoubtedly, it takes work. So
Yeah.
help me think through creativity. If I've been living in my little box or jail cell for a while and I'm just not creative. I go to work, I come home. On the weekends, I sleep in. Sundays, I get the grocery shopping done. I watch football, I go to bed, and I go back to work on Monday. That's just my life, and I'll do it for 45 years. And then maybe retire if I'm lucky. How do you help me and us break out of that and have a little bit more imagination, not only for our lives, but for our days?
Yeah, I think it starts with those small moments. We think of creativity often as the thing that the master painter does or the Grammy award winning, musician, and it feels so lofty and it feels like the zone of geniuses. But creativity is something that comes in the day to day. It can be in the way that you text a friend back, and you choose to be witty and jokey in that text instead of just keeping it, plain. There's so many micro moments of creativity like that. It could be in, deciding to improvise how you make dinner and like just work with the things in the fridge. That's an act of creativity, right? So one is expanding our definition of what creativity is, that it's something that's only for certain people. Creativity is for every single one of us. We come onto this earth playful and creative, and it's a
Yeah.
muscle. So, the more we stretch it, the more it exists, and the more we recognize it in our day-to-day life, the more I think we're able to nurture it and find those satisfying moments of creativity. And so, yeah, I think it starts in the smallest the smallest spaces and the spaces that feel safe too, right? Like if you haven't really practiced your creativity in a long time, maybe you're not writing a poem and reciting in front of a room full of
Right.
people. Maybe it does just come in deciding to write a text in a more, in a more playful way, or maybe it comes in the way that you prepare a meal and you decide to try something a different way, or it comes in yeah, taking a moment of imagination, looking into your coffee cup in the morning and imagining, you're having coffee with someone that you love that you can't be with in that moment. Like that's just a small moments where you can just consciously choose to expand your creativity a little bit.
Mm.
Then it just grows from there.
Something I think you just naturally do, but it's changed your life because you do it so well is noticing. So for those of us who maybe our sunglasses are a little too darkened or our glasses aren't quite sharp enough or the cataracts have begun to wear away at the brilliance of the life around us, how do you help us notice a little bit more what's in front of us and we're missing?
Yeah, I think it's really about carving out space for noticing, even if it's 1 minute, even if you look around your room right now and you find five things that are blue. It can just be these small quests. For me, it's these wanders. I go on a walk or I'm commuting and I just decide to not look at my phone. I look up, I see if I can find anything that's delightful, that's amusing, that's beautiful in the world around. So, it's a practice, and it's also a real relief sometimes. How often do you look up? Most of
Mm,
us walk around looking down at the phone, down at the ground, sometimes just even looking up and seeing what can you notice.
mm.
You'll be surprised, a balloon in the sky, a cloud that's shaped like a anteater, you know, beautiful moldings on a building. You don't know. Take a look up.
So you and I, before we recorded, we were talking about New York, and this past week I was up there with my daughter and wife. And when I'm in New York, normally I'm there for work. And I still love New York, but it is work. Go to the hotel, check in late, do the meeting, get back to LaGuardia, go home. And this time I got there early, stayed an extra day, left the phone in the hotel room, and just
Oh,
danced through the sidewalks and the Ubers and the taxis with my wife and daughter. It was
ah,
awesome. But I was amazed at how all these buildings I'd been by a million times. Little Grace was noticing things about them I'd never seen. I'd been by the same buildings a ton of times. And it was changing not only my experience of seeing the building, but my experience in New York.
mm,
Why is that important not only for John, his wife, and his daughter? Good for them. Why is that important for us collectively right now?
yeah. Well, there's a lot of great, science around awe and how it connects us to the wider world. It helps us to be more compassionate, to feel more, yeah, connected to each other and to life. So I think that when we take the time to notice and to practice wonder, it has a lot of benefits for ourselves and our lives. And I think in this time, we are so disconnected. We're outsourcing our brains to AI. Creativity is on the decline.
Mm,
We feel lonelier and more disconnected, more dead inside than ever. And noticing is just a small act of connecting you to life and to the flow of life too. Like what you're saying, you're noticing things that were there, but they were outside of your perception. So all of a sudden, it wakes up a lot of curiosity, right?
right.
Like, what else am I not noticing?
Mm,
And every day, I do these walks all the time, often on the same route. Every day, there's new things to be seen, and especially when we feel like when I'm in a depressive period and I feel, more adrift or more disconnected from life, it helps me to get back into the flow of life, to know that life is moving and I'm moving with life, and that there's always beauty, there's always wonder, there's always something to be connected to.
mm. Pierre, you've been doing a lot of interviews. You've been speaking about this a lot. You've been teaching play in your workshops for years now, and you really modeled it as a leader professionally. So it's just in your DNA. It's one thing for people to get a review of the book or for them to hear you and I talking. I think it's even more meaningful when it's like, yeah, but hear this story, John. I got to tell you this one story I got. So is there a testimony from someone who wasn't sure if the idea would work, but they were like, yeah, I'll try it. And they tested a little play in their life and they tested a little bit more and they found some benefit in some area of their life that you can share with us.
There's so many. I'm like, where do I start? My brain just went to this one tiny story, which was this new mom, Linda. She was having a lot of anxiety about being a new mom and wanting to get it right, and just the caring for her baby, it all felt so overwhelming. And she started to tell herself that every outing, every new milestone that she was trying to do, she just called it practice. And by doing that, she was able to move through and kind of get the reps on these new experiences. She said, okay, it's my first time changing my baby in a public place. It's practice. And it lowered the stakes so that she was able to get more comfortable, more familiar, and more confident over time and less anxious. And I think that's what play really does for us. When we frame it as play, it naturally lowers the stakes. It makes it feel more, joyful, more exploratory, more experimental. And in doing so, we're able to get those reps in life
Yeah.
that actually lead us to be more resourceful and more connected. So I love that story. And I often, after she told it to me, I started to, when I had a big, even sometimes like this, like, this is a big opportunity to do this podcast, but I tell myself it's practice,
Yeah.
you know, because it's also when I'm done, I do this exercise called So How'd It Go? And I asked myself, okay, what were three things that went well? What were two things that I learned? What's one, oops, I don't want to do that again. And so I'm able to kind of see it as it was practice. And
A great exercise.
there's always things, we can celebrate ourselves for. There's always things to learn, and there's always things that, we want to do differently next time. And that is the
Mm.
practice of life.
Man, that's so good. In almost the exact opposite way, one of our other podcast guests, I think it was Kurt Warner. Warner's a quarterback, played in New York for a while, played out in Phoenix for a while, and played with St. Louis, won a Super Bowl, Hall of Famer. And he was off to a football game, kissing the kids goodbye. And one of the kids said to him, have fun playing with your friends. Because the kid didn't realize, like, the world's watching. uh, your contract is writing on this. You're going to be judged by the media. You will either be cut or you'll make it the following. Like, no, 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 no. Have fun playing with your friends. So whether you view life as practice or play, I think both are appropriate as we journey forward. And I want to thank you really for writing the book. I thought it was awesome.
Thank you
The
so much.
reminder of the title, The Playful Way. And before I tell audiences where they can pick up their copy, we do have 7 questions that tether all of our guests together. We call them the Live Inspired 7. I have every confidence that these will not show up on the things you could have done better. So here we go. Question number 1 for Piera. What's the most impactful book you've ever read?
I'll say that On the Day You Were Born, it's a kid's book that my mom read me every year on my birthday, and I now read it to my daughter every year on her
Oh,
birthday.
that is precious. What's the essence of the book?
It's basically this beautiful book that on the day you were born, that it reminds you that you're on this spinning earth and that all these incredible things were happening on the earth and with nature and with the galaxy and with people, and that you're a part of this bigger world, this bigger galaxy, this bigger connectivity of life.
Mm, that's worth a read and
Yeah.
embracing. So, question number 2, what is one positive characteristic, one beautiful trait that you possessed as a little girl growing up in Maine, and you wish you exhibited as brilliantly today?
Maybe self-love.
Mm,
I think as a child, as a really little girl, I didn't have all these self-criticism, all these, negative beliefs about myself. And that's something I work really hard to shift back to that state of, just existing and not questioning my worth and not questioning, am I good enough?
I'm curious because I think so many folks struggle with self-love. They struggle with No one judges them more harshly than they judge themselves ever.
Yeah.
So here you have built a beautiful, beautiful business and then businesses, plural, and this big movement and everything else, and done well and all the ways that the world judges success. And you wonder if you're enough. So what's an exercise when you struggle with that? Like, am I doing this thing well enough? Whatever the thing is, what's something you leverage that brings you back in and allows you to breathe in new air and then ultimately exhale out the old?
I write notes to myself. So I have this practice of self-compassion notes. I call them love notes to myself, and I write them. I write Dear Sweet Pea. That's my childhood nickname. And then essentially it's like as though I'm my own loving best friend. I say, okay, you're struggling with this. That's hard. Remember that you've done this before, that you've conquered it, that you have these beautiful qualities. So whatever I'm going through, I kind of just observe it through,
Yeah.
I try and observe it as though I'm my own friend. And then I kind of give myself advice and love as though I'm my own best friend. And I find it really grounding, both to observe and notice whatever I'm going through, and then to try and approach myself with that kindness and that unconditional love that a best friend would.
Mm,
That's so hard to give ourselves so much of the time.
that's so good. That is such a great takeaway. Why can't we love ourselves as much as our best friend who we only see, every third week would
Yeah,
love us?
yeah,
So I think that's great advice. Write yourself a little love letter, sweet pea.
yeah,
Question
exactly.
number three, if your home caught fire and all living things are out, you have an opportunity of running back in and grabbing one item. What physical thing would you come racing back outside with?
Probably I have this little frame photo of my grandparents. It's in a little tin frame from their honeymoon in Niagara Falls. And I don't know, I just love it. I just cherish it. It's the first thing I thought of that I would go and grab picture of Nana and Nano.
It's so good. If you could sit on a bench on a gorgeous New York day and have a long conversation with anyone living or deceased, who would you like to be next to?
My daughter.
What's the best advice you've ever received?
Oh, my mom told me hydrate or die.
That's good advice. I hope you are abiding by it.
I am. I try to. I actually need, is it the advice I need most?
What advice would you give yourself if you could give yourself some back at age 20? So, what advice does that 20-year-old woman need to receive from you now?
I would tell myself, be good to Sweet Pea. I think I've really struggled with self-kindness and self-love, and valuing myself and seeing my worth. And I think, when I've made decisions out of a place of lack or of believing I'm not worthy, those have been some of the worst, most painful decisions. And so I would definitely go back and teach her this self-compassion, love note writing practice, and just remind her that she's wonderful,
Mm.
that her playful, creative spirit is a beautiful force in the world, and trust it and be good to Sweet Pea.
Well, my friend, Sweet Pea, it has been said that all great people can have their lives summed up in one sentence. How would you like yours to read?
She came, she played, she lived. I have thought that maybe my gravestone would say she lived.
Piera Gelardi, I appreciate you coming and playing and living and reminding the rest of us that we can do likewise, to be a little bit more compassionate, a little bit more curious, a little bit more humble, have a little bit more fun, be a little bit more playful, and don't take yourself so seriously, but start taking life a little bit more seriously. It's been a pleasure getting to know you and getting to interview you on this conversation.
Thanks so much, and thanks for playing.
My friend, by the way, where can we learn more about your work?
Well, my book, The Playful Way, of course, my website, pieragelardi.com, and you can find me on social media as Piera Luisa, Luisa.
Well, Piera Gelardi, I want to thank you for being part of our family today. I want to thank you for playing with us, and I want to thank you for reminding us today that the foundation is firm and the best is yet to come. So, family and friends, for this time. And until next time, my name is John O'Leary, and today is your day. What a gift. Go play
Go
and
play.
live inspired.